Hello, my name is Alexis, and today I'll be talking to you about dreams. I'm a writer, so I'm going to write. That quote can be attributed to Lorraine Hansberry, as written when writing to Robert Nemiroff, December 26, 1952, in the book To Be Young, Gifted, and Black. Lorraine Hansberry, in her own words. Today I want to talk to you not only about dreams, but I want you to re-examine, if you haven't already thought deeply about the concept of dreams. What does it mean to you? What did it mean to your ancestors, the forefathers? Uh, could it be said that you stand on the proverbial shoulders of your ancestors' dreams? Me particularly, my dream is to become a cultural anthropologist at the master's level. I'm fascinated by humans and cultures, and right now I'm currently pursuing an associate's in behavioral science for pretty much the same reason. Humans are just fascinating objectively. I have various creative goals and talents. However, as they say, master of many things. Oh, excuse me. A man of many talents and a master of none. Something like that. However, many people are talented, and it's worth it to eventually narrow things down into realistic plans, both long and short-term goals. I'm hoping to make things a little bit easier for you in achieving your goals, or at least to give you an additional tool for your tool bag. And it's a small poem. It isn't long at all. It didn't take me long at all to remember it, even though I'm not the greatest at memorizing things. The poem is called Harlem. It was written by Langston Hughes, 1951, during a period of time which would be considered the precursor to the civil rights movement in the 60s, 50s, and 60s. Again, the title is Harlem. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Does it fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Does it crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? So there are two ways to interpret this poem, I guess. More than two ways, but let's just narrow it down to a quick two. Ultimately, they can be narrowed. The poem can be narrowed down to either consider what the poet had in mind. Was it a positive connotation? Was it a negative connotation? What kind of tone did the poem take on? Or what kind of poem did it take? What kind of tone did the poem take on? For me, it sounds more pessimistic than optimistic, considering the time frame that it was written in. First, you have to consider the time frame which bred a sort of revolutionary spirit, or a sort of rejuvenation of deeply ingrained principles. The alternative title was A Dream Deferred. So what does it mean? What does it feel like to be denied something, a dream? To dream about something that others see as a human right, and it comes to them as a birthright. Okay, so to focus on the second and third line, does it fester like a sore and then run? That seems to me to hold a seriously negative connotation. A festering sore is essentially rotting flesh. So if a dream was a living thing, to see it rotting would be, a defeat. It would be the end. Does it fester like a sore and then run? Um, take or the next line. Does it stink like rotten meat? So think about it. We eat meat. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Would you eat rotten meat? No. Typically, no. Under any circumstances, no. Um, and to think about in what context you would actually consider eating rotten meat, things would have to be pretty dire. Um, uh, okay, so the poem was written in 1951. Um, the poem is titled Harlem, and the first line is a raisin in the sun. What happens to a raisin in the sun? Considering that, again, another negative connotation, it dries up, it shrivels up. If that raisin or that grape, formal grape, were there, again, take it, if it was the dream, a shriveled up dream isn't very much of use to anyone. I don't know. On the other hand, looking at things optimistically, a dream deferred, a dream postponed isn't a dream denied. It isn't a dream defeated. Even if there is denial, it can be seen as temporary, right? The difference is the human spirit, the indomitable human spirit, the ability to persevere over things, regardless of how they seem, knowing that time is the only constant. The play was written in 1959, A Raisin in the Sun, and obviously it takes its name from Langston Hughes' poem, from the first line, actually. That information can also be found on Encyclopedia Britannica Incorporated, through Encyclopedia Britannica Incorporated, and I found it on encyclopedia.com or britannica.com. So it's a 3-act play. It talks about an African-American Chicago family ultimately moving into a white neighborhood, and it was styled after Lorraine Hansberry's own family struggle after they themselves moved into a predominantly white neighborhood. Harlem at the time, pre-civil rights era, was a pretty popular nightlife destination. People were allowed to dream as big and as wide as they could possibly imagine. The poem itself was written as part of a series by Langston Hughes describing life in Harlem. Okay. So this time period was also considered the Negro Renaissance or the new Negro movement. According to Encyclopedia Britannica Incorporated, the Harlem Renaissance lasted for a period from about 1918 to 1937, and that was seen as a time in which African Americans challenged stereotypes successfully. So just a few things I wanted to show as a visual aid. At the time of the Harlem Renaissance, the arts and humanities community came up with a lot of different creative ideas. Those ideas went on to inspire movements, both political, legislatively, and artistically in the 1960s and onward. One guy I was particularly interested in, and this is just an illustrated picture of him. This is Gil Scott Heron. He was a famous poet in the 1960s and 70s, writing songs and poems like "We Almost Lost Detroit." Well, that's a good one. We Almost Lost Detroit. That's one I can think of. There's just so many of them. It's hard to narrow it down. And here's another, just example of how hard it is to even now overcome adversity and make sure that we can see our dreams realized. This is a book called Urban Trauma: Legacy of Racism. Initially, in the first few chapters, it talks about the period of Harlem Renaissance in Harlem, and it goes on to talk about how even still, we're subjected to different injustices and have a certain level of trauma. It's by Majah Akbar. Sorry, I haven't figured out the lighting. Majah Akbar, Urban Trauma. It's actually a picture of her son on the front cover. She came and did a speech for us at Gateway. I'd like to read a piece of a page from page 146 in Urban Trauma. In the 2000s, only about 54.3% of adult blacks with mental health issues receive treatment, but stigma is still attached to receiving mental health services. So, in conclusion, a dream deferred is just that. If you have the will, you can pretty much overcome anything, just about. I mean, don't underestimate the power of the human spirit. So again, just to wrap things up, quick poem to add to your tool bag to stay encouraged. Harlem by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Does it fester and soar? Does it fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Does it crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Or maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? It's important to keep dreams alive. Hold steadfast to dreams, if you will. I don't know. Dream deferred can be a very heavy load. It's important that those of us who can see the light at the end of the tunnel, we be a beacon of hope for others and encourage them to pursue their dreams. Because what happens to a dream deferred? Does it explode? These days are challenging. However, collectively as a species, I believe in us. And that's my dream, honestly. Don't let someone else sink if you have the ability to. Don't let the weight of a deferred dream become an anchor. Thank you.